Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. This is Josh Wander from Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh, and I'm here with my co-host, Rabbi Moshe Liftman of Beit Shemesh.
Yes, hello. Welcome to our show, and we have a really good one ahead of us. We have a great guest on. Well, I'll let Josh fill you in on that, but make sure that you're with us the entire hour.
Absolutely. You don't want to miss this one. We do have a superstar on, so you want to stay tuned and listen to that. This is a live show, so we encourage you to call in with your comments and your questions. And if you unfortunately are stuck in North America, you would want to call the number 301-768-4841. That's 301-768-4841. That's the number to call if you're stuck in North America. If you're here in Eretz Israel, if you are privileged to be here, the number you would call is 02650-0151. That's 02650-0151. This is Israel Unplugged. This is where you get all the unadulterated facts of where we're holding in the redemptive process, focusing primarily on the ingathering of the exiles. Now, the ingathering of the exiles is all about this week's parsha, this week's Torah portion, or I should say this week's Torah portion is all about the ingathering of the exiles. It is its source, and therefore this is a great week to speak about that subject. And again, I want to encourage people to go on to our websites. Rabbi Lichtman's website is at torattzion.com, torattzion.com. And our website is at bringthemhome.org.il. If that's too hard for you, go to itstimetoleave.com. And if that's too hard for you, israeltorah.org also works. All those go to the same place. And we encourage you to go and visit. Each one of them has an entire resource guide to Aliyah, to Kibbutz Galiot, to the return of the exiles, to the Jewish people returning home. It has a video series. It has audio. It has this show as well as others, blogs, podcasts, and more. Please go visit those two websites. We're going to be right back with you in a few minutes. And like I said, do not miss this because you're going to love this show. Stay tuned.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. As promised in our introduction, we have a social media superstar here with us today. And just to give you a short clip, which has been provided with permission from JTV, we're going to start with that, and then I'll give the full introduction.
Hey, colonizer, or should I say Zionist? I mean, they're pretty much the exact same thing, right?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing if you don't know what words mean. Zionist. Definition: a person who believes that the Jewish people have the right to self-determination and self-defense in their indigenous homeland. Colonizer. Definition: a person who helps take control of an area or country that is not their own. Now see, the word Jewish literally means of Judea. Contrary to popular belief, the word doesn't necessarily denote religious affiliation, but rather a national origin. It's funny how you seem to have confused an indigenous rights movement with its direct antithesis. More than that, the name Palestine was given to the region of Judea by Roman colonizers. You know, the foreign entity that took control of our land that wasn't theirs and displaced us by means of either genocide or forcing us onto slave ships. Yeah, after the suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt, an indigenous rights movement, if you will, led by Judean warriors in order to take their land back from oppressive, destructive Roman rule, the Roman Emperor Hadrian Mehirat decided to rename the territory from Judea to Syria Palestina in 135 CE. And this was to completely disconnect Jews from their indigenous homeland of Judea. And here's the kicker. Palestina comes from the Hebrew root polesh, meaning invade. Hadrian literally renamed it invaded land, which must then mean, technically, Palestinian means invader, or, dare I say it, colonizer.
But to remove the ignorance from your mind takes research and hard work that Zionists such as yourself just aren't willing to do.
Is that a challenge? Okay, this is so exciting. So you're going to say something stupid, and I'm going to correct it with research and hard work because this Zionist is willing to do it.
And this Zionist we have on the air right now, her name is Hila Oz. She is an Orthodox Jewish woman who has been using her platforms on social media to fight for Israel and the Jewish people. She graduated from UCLA in 2020 and has been making pro-Israel content since her senior year. She has since gained over 5,000 followers on Twitter and over 12,000 followers on TikTok. More recently, her YouTube show, Hot Take with Hila on JTV, has gained popularity as she takes down anti-Semites and explains how their claims are based in hatred and ignorance. She moved to Israel a little over a year ago and hopes to inspire Jews around the world to arm themselves with knowledge, mitzvot, and pride in their Judaism. You can follow Hila on Twitter at TOTESKOSH and on TikTok at Totally Kosher. Welcome to the show, Hila.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. We're so excited to have you because you are really a superstar. You are the one that we send out. You know, it's like Rambo. When we send out somebody to fight our battles, you are the modern day. Who should I compare it to, Rabbi Liftman? To Yehudis, to Yehudit.
Oh my gosh,
a modern
thank you.
day Warris. And I love what you do. I've watched a number of your videos. You remind me of myself when I was younger, except you speak in about 2 times or 3 times the speed as I do, so I have to watch it a few times for me to get all the details. But it's amazing to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Southern California. I was raised in an Israeli household. My father immigrated from Israel in his 20s. Israel's always been a huge part of my life. I've been there more times than I can count, been here more times than I can count. And no matter where I was, I've had quite the journey coming to observant Judaism. But no matter where I was religiously, Eretz Yisrael was always this huge part of my life, and I've always felt super connected to this land. It's always been home, and I'm just kind of a nerd, so my biggest pet peeve is ignorance and people just spreading misinformation willingly, and you see that a lot in the quote-unquote anti-Zionist world. And when I saw that, you know, growing on TikTok specifically, I just knew I didn't have it in me to not speak out. So thank God I've gotten quite the following, and I hope that, you know, through my content, I'm bringing a little bit more truth and light to the world.
How do you find these anti-Semites? How do you find their content?
I think that for some reason, the way that the algorithm works, it just put it in front of me, and I don't know, maybe it's Hashem saying it's time to take this guy down and show the world, you know, why this is false. And obviously when you start interacting with anti-Semites, the algorithm thinks you want to interact with anti-Semites. So I guess after a while, I would see it on my For You page, and I try to debunk as much as I possibly can.
When you were in UCLA not so long ago, I can only imagine, because when I was in college so many years ago, there was already anti-Semitism that was bubbling under the undercurrent in the college campuses in the United States. But today, I've heard it is so difficult to be a Jew on a college campus in America. Did you yourself experience any anti-Semitism on campus?
Absolutely. And I mean, I was only at UCLA for 2 years because I was a transfer. And I thought, you know, I was kind of isolating myself in my schoolwork and in Jewish clubs, and I thought, oh, I'll kind of keep myself safe, which I kind of regret not getting out there a little bit more and fighting it a little bit more while I was there. But I remember, so I got a theater degree, and I was doing a year-long intensive theater history course. And, of course, they didn't mention Jewish contribution to theater, even though Jews built American theater, which still baffles me to this day. But we were reading a play that was anti-racism, anti-colonialism, all good values that I obviously believe in. But the play itself was based off of an anti-Semitic theatrical form called Commedia dell'arte, whose villain is a Jew. And if you'll notice in a lot of media that we consume today, the villain is always hunchbacked, hook-nosed, greedy, and it's it all stems from Blood Libel and all of these Jewish archetypes. It all goes back to this Renaissance theatrical form called Commedia dell'arte. So it took the masked element of that, and it was using anti-Semitic slurs. And when I called out the fact that I thought this play, despite the fact that it was anti-racist and anti-imperialist, and that's good, it was anti-Semitic, I was shut down by the professor. Non-Jewish students said I was overreacting, that it wasn't actually an anti-Jewish slur, that whatever. And at the end of the class, I've always been, a goody two-shoes. I would never, ever say anything bad to a teacher. But I was so angry at the end of the class, I went up to the teacher and I said, I really don't like, as a Jew, I really don't like how you handled this class today. And he said to me, I'm black and gay. How can I be anti-Semitic? And I play through that conversation a lot in my head because I wish I would have just said, I'm a Jewish woman. Could I not be racist? That's a ridiculous thing to say. One has nothing to do with the other. And shortly after that, I was having a conversation with my rabbi at a cafe on campus, and one of the girls from the class came up to me and said that I was not representing the Jewish people very well in the class, and I was too privileged to speak up. And I had just come back from Poland, and I said, I just came back from seeing where our ancestors used to be. I am pretty privileged that they're not shoving me into a gas chamber, that I have free speech. So how dare I not use my privilege in that case to speak out against anti-Semitism when my ancestors may not have had that right? And she went on to continue to harass me, and anytime I would bring up the oppression of the Jewish people or anti-Semitism, she would always shut it down and say it wasn't the time. And you'll see that a lot. People seem to be really agitated whenever anti-Semitism is brought up, and it's never the time for them. But when will it be the time? Because we're being, attacked in the streets of New York, and we're being, rockets are falling on us in our homeland, and why can't we speak about that? Why is that such an issue? So, yeah.
So you're telling me this was a fellow Jew who was saying this to you. So, I mean, we know sometimes our worst enemies are ourselves, unfortunately.
Yeah. From my understanding, she was a patrilineal, non-affiliated Jew. But all the same, she had told me that she had experienced anti-Semitism, and it was just insane to me that someone, who is a part of the Jewish community in whatever way she was, and who has claimed to have experienced anti-Semitism, would be so bothered by another Jew standing up against it.
I'm a patrilineal, unaffiliated Jew, so how could I be an anti-Semite?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
You'll see that also from, non-Jewish communities who claim to be Semites, even though that's a group of languages and not, a racial group. I'm Semitic. How can I be an anti-Semite? It's a ridiculous question. But yeah.
There are hundreds of thousands, unfortunately, of Jews, Israeli Jews, that have left Israel. We don't like to talk about it that often, but it's a serious phenomenon that we should discuss, probably at some later date. A lot of them have found their, quote, home in Southern California. You come from Israeli descent, but that does not automatically mean that you were going to move back to Israel. What brought you back to Israel?
I always knew that if I wasn't going to work in America, I'd move to Israel, because I was, on this track of going into theater. Hopefully I wanted to do sitcoms or Broadway or whatever it was. It kind of seemed, I can't really move to Israel, but if I wasn't doing this, I definitely would. But as I became what we call Choser B'Tshuva, as I became religious later in life, and saw that I wanted to use these talents in a different way, that wasn't necessarily in the very corrupt worlds of Hollywood and Broadway, it just kind of seemed like a no-brainer. And I remember when Corona first hit and it seemed like the world was falling apart, I was like, how is this not Hashem? Like, the borders are closing. How is this not Hashem, like, yelling at us to come home? And so I wasn't able to immediately move as soon as I could.
Please stay with us, and we're going to be right back.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things. But at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Shalom, I'm Leah Aharoni. Join me on my show, News from the Torah. Each Sunday, we'll use the weekly Torah portion as a prism for understanding the news today. Listen to News from the Torah to gain clarity about the times we're living in and to understand your own spiritual path in the process. News from the Torah every Sunday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. We had the great first segment with Hila Oz, and we're continuing now. I interrupted her right in the middle of her story of how she came back to Israel. Did you want to continue that, or do you want to go on to another subject?
We can move on.
Okay, well, I'll ask a question. It's on the topic, but not from your personal perspective. I've seen pretty much all of your videos and very impressed by the way you present your arguments.
Thank you.
My question is, if you would have to put out a video trying to argue, not against anti-Semites or anything like that, but against Jews who are apathetic to the whole idea of coming back to the land of Israel and who don't get the point that, God has brought the Jewish people back and it's time to come back home. Give me a few points of what you would say on such a video.
First off, I think it's such an emotional topic because we do get tied to the places where we're living, and we want to be with our family, we want to be where we're comfortable. And I think that in order to have a really productive conversation about Aliyah, we first have to have a conversation about why the Jewish people are different, why we aren't like everyone else, where if you move to another country, it's not really such a big deal. And I think the greatest example of how we know that the Jewish people are different is the way that people treat the state of Israel. We are a speck on the map. Our conflicts are nowhere death toll-wise compared to what's going on, say, in Afghanistan, which is currently going on right now, say in Syria or Yemen, all of these incredible humanitarian crises that no one really talks about. They're only focused and really obsessed with the Jew. So there is something there. There is something to the fact that the Jew is different. And, of course, this all goes back to our covenant with God and our covenant to keep the Torah. And within the Torah, it says that we're supposed to be in this land. We are a part of this land. More than, this land belongs to us, we belong to it. It is such a gift that has been given to us. And I had a rabbi at a seminary that I went to. He once said, when we were sent into exile, it's because we misbehaved, and it was like a father sending his child from the table to his room to go to timeout. And when the father says, okay, timeout is over, it's time to come back to the dinner table, let's have a conversation, let's mend our relationship, and the child says, no, I want to stay in my room, he's missed the point of timeout. The point of timeout is to think about, how you can be better so that you can grow in your relationship. So when we're still in exile and we're saying, no, I don't want to come home, my bed is comfy, I can change the lights however I want, you've missed the point of timeout. you have the opportunity now to be in the land that your forefathers fought for, that they died for, and that all of your ancestors would pray to 3 times a day, every single day, begging God to come home, to return, and you're just throwing away that gift because it's comfortable in exile, even though it might not really be so comfortable, because if you look at it, anti-Semitism is well on the rise today, especially when we had that conflict with Hamas a few months back. It was up over 500% in places like England. I think it's important, to look at why we were sent into exile and why we need to come back and what it means to come back.
Rabbi Lechman, you're satisfied with that?
Well, as a start, yes, and I want you to do it. You go tell the people at JTV that you want to put out a video geared towards the Jews of America and explaining to them why they should come back. But it's a fantastic start. Yes, 100%.
Thank you. I'm very passionate about it. I think it doesn't make sense. I really love, if I can bring the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, he talks about like the importance of being simple, not in a way that's like uneducated or ignorant, but simple in your devotion. And, when something makes sense, you go with it. And what makes sense is that the Jews should live in Israel. It's the simple. We shouldn't overcomplicate the argument. We should just know Jews belong here, and so we should come home.
Yeah, that's something we've spoken about many times, Josh, about how it's amazing that Chozrim b'tshuva, right, Jews who have come back to the fold and also converts to Judaism are usually, when you speak to them about it, they say, well, we just read in the Bible about how important Israel was, and therefore that's why we came and made Aliyah. Like they're not brought up with this, ability to, finagle their way out of, out of what
dissonance.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think that could be part of the reason Hila is also, thinks that this is such an obvious thing, because she wasn't brought up religious and she came to it on her own, and she probably studied and realized, this is clear. This is where the Jewish people belong. Like, it's so obvious.
So yesterday I actually was turned on to another YouTube channel of an amazing woman in America. She was born a Roman Catholic, and then she converted to Judaism. Wow. And she converted first through a Reformed congregation, because that was the only one that was around her that she was available. And she converted Reform, and she thought she was completely Jewish. And then she figured she wants to marry a Jew. So she started looking on Jewish dating sites, and she found this nice-looking Jew who was becoming a rabbi. And they started talking, and he started asking about her conversion, and she said that it was a Reformed conversion. So he said to her, you're actually not Jewish. And she said, what? And she's like, what do you mean I'm not Jewish? So he explained that there's a specific way of going through a halachic conversion that is valid. And since you did not do it that way, so you're not actually halachically considered to be Jewish. And she was just blown away by this, and she started to reinvestigate Judaism and go through the whole process. And again, she spent another year going through the process of getting moving into the Orthodox community, and then getting an Orthodox conversion, eventually marrying an Orthodox man, having 3 children, which there's a whole story in that, because she couldn't have children. And anyways, I wrote her a long letter yesterday, an email, and I basically said to her, your story is absolutely incredible. I said, and I really appreciate the sincerity and the honesty that you have when it comes to looking at, what you believe is true and Judaism. And I just want to help you take that one step further by speaking about the land of Israel and how the Jews belong in the land of Israel. She knows the Bible, and I'm sure she knows about what the Bible says about the land of Israel. And I was curious to know, like, what was holding her back from that last step of, okay, you've gone through conversions, and you've reached almost the pinnacle of where you want to be on a spiritual realm, but you're just missing that one piece, which is an incredibly important piece, because 1/3 of the commandments in the Torah can only be performed here in the land of Israel, and so much of what we do here in Israel incorporates our spiritual desires and there's just, for me, there's no other place that a Jew, an Orthodox Jew, would feel comfortable except for being in the land of Israel. So I just challenged her a little bit in this email, and I said, you know what, look at our website, watch some of the videos, and tell me what you think. So I'm waiting to hear back from her. I hope I don't cause any shalom bayis problems with her husband, but you're absolutely right, Rabbi Lichtman, that people that don't have this are not born with this this understanding that Golos, that the exile is where we were born and this is where we belong. They have a very different perspective on things.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon something extremely important, and that is there's this thing called the truth-happiness paradigm, and that's if you seek happiness, you will not find it, but if you seek truth, you'll find happiness. And, I really resonate when I learned about that. I really resonated with it because, for someone like me, when I understood that Torah is true, I was like, okay, that means I have to start following what it says, and I can't make excuses for myself. And yeah, I could allow myself to be, willfully ignorant and say, oh, but it's antiquated or whatever. I could make up a million excuses for myself to stay where I was going in my life. I was on a completely, different trajectory. And I think it's the same thing with the question of Aliyah. It's comfortable, or so they've told themselves, it's comfortable to be in exile. And when they really get down to it, the truth of the matter is, if you're Jewish, you should be in the land of Israel. And if that's the truth, how can you ignore it?
It's amazing. When I was writing this email, I kept using certain language, which I kept correcting. I really feel horrible about this, but I kept correcting because I sounded like a Christian. I did not want to sound like one, but I felt like I was sounding like a Christian missionary by saying, if you really want to be a fulfilled Jew, a complete Jew, a messianic Jew, which are all perfectly fine terms in themselves. They have been just kidnapped and taken by missionaries and by other groups.
Of course.
But unfortunately, this is really, being in Israel really is the way that one becomes a fulfilled, complete messianic Jew. Again, not in any way, shape, or form what the missionaries use those terms about, but that is really what I felt. And I, of course, I didn't use those terms because I knew that they may not be taken well. But Rabbi Lichtman, this week's parsha deals with, it is the source of the idea of the ingathering of the exiles. We're running out of time in this segment, but I want you to tell over a little bit of
We'll be quick. We'll be very quick.
Torah.
We'll try to do it quick. Yeah. So the pasuk says that God tells us that He's going to send us into exile, and then He's going to gather us back from the exile. And I'll put it this way. I'll start with the question, and you'll have to come back after the break to hear the answer. The question is, the pasuk says twice, "V'shav Hashem Elokecha shvutcha v'richamecha, v'shav v'kibetzcha mikol ha'amim." He will return and bring you back, and it says the word v'shav twice. And besides which, it also says the word v'shav and not v'heshiv. Anybody who knows Hebrew knows that it should say v'heshiv. Hashem will return us. Vishav means He Himself will return. So very strange. So what exactly that means, you're going to have to come back in about 2 minutes after the break, and you'll hear the answer.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on The Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Okay, welcome back to Israel Unplugged. So I left you with two questions. Why does the pasuk repeat the word Veshav when it talks about the ingathering of the exiles, that God will return, God will return? And why does it say Veshav and not Vehishiv? So on the second question, Rashi already tells us something very famous, that when we go into exile, God actually goes into exile with us. It's based on the verse, Imo anochi b'tzara. God is with the Jewish people in their suffering. And therefore, if we're suffering in exile, God, as if to say, goes down to exile with us. Which means that when we come back from exile, we also bring God back, which puts the whole idea of Aliyah into a totally different perspective. It's not just make Aliyah because it's good for you as a Jew, or it's because what you're supposed to do. But think about God. God is, as if to say, again, this is all, however we understand this, but God is to a certain degree in Galut. It's called the Shechinta Begaluta. God's divine presence is in exile, and he wants to get out. And he has opened the gates to the land of Israel so that the Jewish people can come home. So when a Jew decides not to come home, he's in reality preventing a part of God from coming back to his real home, which is, of course, the land of Israel. So that's answer number one to the second question. But the first question of Vishav, the double Vishav, what is that about? And this is one of my favorite pieces. Rav Meir Simcha Dvinsk, right? Very famous rabbi, the Meshech Chochma, the Or Sameach. He explains that the reason that the pasuk says it twice is because it's actually going to be two different stages of the ingathering of the exiles. And I'll read it exactly, word for word, what he says. God will first return and have mercy on the Jews who are in captivity, those who yearn for Eretz Yisrael and want to flee the diaspora as a prisoner wants to flee from prison. That's the first ingathering. The second part of the verse, when it says, and he will gather you from all the nations, refers to the Jews who have found contentment in foreign lands, those who have lost any desire for the land of the deer. Hashem will gather them too, and he will return them afterwards. Meaning, the way the ingathering is going to happen, which it actually did happen, is Jews who were in lands of oppression were first gathered in, or at least giving the opportunity, right? The Jews of Germany, of Europe in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Jews who came back were fleeing oppression. Those Jews are the first Jews who will be ingathered. And when that's finished, and if you think about it, there really is nowhere in the world today where Jews are really being oppressed. Now, there's anti-Semitism, we know that, but the actual state-run oppression of the Jewish people, it doesn't exist anymore. There's no Nazi Germany anymore in the world. Jews are free to go wherever they want. Jews are in lands of comfort now, and that is what we're waiting for. We're waiting for the second stage of the ingathering of the exiles, so that the Jews who are in lands of comfort will understand that they need to get up. They're not going to be forced necessarily. Maybe eventually, if they don't get the picture, they're going to be forced. But at this point, God wants us to make the decision on our own to come, pick up, and make Aliyah.
The exception to that rule, I think, is Simon Tov in Afghanistan. But
right. There's one Jew.
The one Jew of Afghanistan that's now under the Taliban rule. But it's interesting. Go ahead, Hila.
Oh, it reminds me. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in Ethics of the Fathers that says that love that is conditional on something, when that thing is gone, the love is gone. But love that is unconditional, it doesn't matter what happens, it will stay. So when Jews, quote unquote, loved Eretz Yisrael on the condition that it saved them from anti-Semitism or real persecution, once that persecution kind of vanishes from the world, their love for Eretz Yisrael unfortunately vanishes with it. And I think that we were talking earlier about a lot of Israelis leaving Israel. That's really what's going on. And it's really unfortunate. So we know that, whatever love that was kind of given to Eretz Yisrael by, the first wave, the early political Zionists, it's not an unconditional love. and it's not the relationship we should have with this land. And we need to, really build something deeper in order to actually, show Jews why they need to live here.
That's what we're trying to do.
I actually came up with this idea last Shabbos. I was speaking at the Kiddush, and I said that when I'm appointed the Sar HaAliyah, the minister of absorption, so one of the first regulations that I'm going to enact is going to be charging Jews from around the world to come home to Eretz Yisrael. I think there's this idea, in fact, this is a well-known idea in marketing and business, that if you give something away for free, then people don't really give it any worth. In fact, there was somebody at the Kiddush that was a big businessman. He was saying that how he was selling some sort of cream or some sort of cosmetic in Sri Lanka. And he said that it was really, when he bought the company, it was being sold from as nothing, and nobody bought it. It was really going under. And then all of a sudden, the first thing he said was, "We're going to charge 10 times the amount or whatever it was for this product." And the sales just skyrocketed. He didn't change anything except for making it a lot more valuable. So Jews around the world, when they don't realize how valuable it is, how important it is to live in Israel, so they just push it off. It's free to come here. They'll give you a free flight. This is the mistake I think that the Jewish Agency has made over the years. They've been saying, come here. We'll make it right for you. We'll give it to you for free. We'll give you a free flight. We'll give you everything you need. And people are like, it's free. How good could it be if it's free? So I said, this is what I say. I say, charge them $50,000, a $50,000 tax to come. Now, of course, there'll be a committee set aside for people that can't afford it that'll give them discounts. But for people that can't afford it, it'll be $50,000. It's going to double every year. So the first year it'll be $50,000. Second year it'll be $100,000. Next year it'll be $200,000. And then people are going to start saying, I better do it quick because it's an investment. If I make Aliyah now, and where's this money going to go? The money that the $50,000, $100,000 is going to go to expatriate all the Arabs that want to leave. If they want to leave, give them this money and give them a package, a welcome package to whatever their next destination is going to be. I think this would be a great plan for boosting Aliyah and solving other issues that we have.
Sounds great.
Anyways, you mentioned Rabbi Lichtman, the Shav Hashem Elkecha Shvoscha. The Talmud explains, in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, this is where the Talmud says that comes up with this idea that the Shekhinah, God's presence, goes into exile with the Jewish people. And this is named in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Of course, on the holiday of Lag BaOmer, I put holiday in quotations, that people from around the world come to Israel, to Meron. There was a terrible tragedy this past year, but throughout the years, thousands of Jews have come from around the world to be in Meron. And Rabbi Shalom Gold of Har Nof is fond of saying Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is turning in his grave. As these Jews are coming from around the world to come to Rabbi Shimon, they're saying how I was with Rabbi Shimon on Lag BaOmer, and then they get on the next plane and they go back to the exile. And they're totally missing the point.
Correct.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. It's the same thing, by the way. Hila mentioned before about Rabbi Nachman, right? So we've already had this discussion. I don't know. I don't want to. If you're really like if you're really a Breslover,
I'm a Yid, but I'm just a Jew. But I really love Rabbi Nachman's teaching, so I don't like to label myself with anything.
We love his teachings also. That's why we love the teachings. We love Eretz Yisrael. We just have a problem with his followers that decide to leave Eretz Yisrael to be with him for Rosh Hashanah.
Right, that's our only problem. We've discussed it many times on this show, and it's coming up. Rosh Hashanah is coming up, and many Jews are leaving the Holy Land to be other places, which is it's sad. So another thing I'd like to mention about the ingathering of the exiles, something that I heard once. It's an amazing thing. That pasuk, which again is clearly the clearest reference to the ingathering of the exiles in the Torah. The Rambam even brings it. When the Rambam talks about the belief in the coming of Mashiach, he quotes that pasuk. To him, that is Mashiach. Mashiach means the ingathering of the exiles. So that pasuk, I don't know who did this, who figured this out, and who counted it, but that pasuk is the 5,708th pasuk in the Torah, which, so you'll say, what's 5708? Well, anybody who knows that 5708 corresponds to the year in the secular calendar of 1948. We count from creation. So right now we're in 5781, about to be 5782. 5708 is 1948. That's the establishment of the State of Israel. And that is the number of the pasuk that we just discussed, that God is going to bring the Jews back to Eretz Yisrael. And that's exactly what the State of Israel did. We have a lot of criticism of the State of Israel, right? We have a lot of problems. It's not religious enough, etc. But there's one thing that nobody can deny, and that is that the establishment of the State of Israel allowed for the ingathering of the exiles. Before the State of Israel, there were... I'm sorry?
Oh, just another thing, that in the Jewish calendar, like you mentioned, we're going into 5782. The year 1948 was the year of Abraham, our patriarch's birth. So there's definitely something going on with this year, and it's obviously not a coincidence. And one of my friends, Lawrence Shankin, he's brilliant. He was talking about how the ingathering of the exiles from the Babylonian Persian exile kind of happened in two stages. So you had the ingathering through Ezra and Nehemiah, and they brought back. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have to end. The show is over. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, but we'll have to get you back on a different episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.